Hi everyone. So I'm not sure why I thought last weekend was the last weekend of April, but this weekend is the last weekend of April and the first week of May 2022, and this is the weekly. So as usual, I want to start with a recap of, what we've covered so far. So basically all systems are designed to require growth because the ones that aren't are replaced by the ones that are. And all systems reach diminishing marginal returns, but the subsystems within any system reaching diminishing marginal returns still require growth, so scarcity turns allies into enemies. And the other thing that happens is that when the supersystem reaches diminishing marginal returns, that compromises the ability for the subsystems to not suffer the diminishing marginal returns as well. So that is also um, another reason why these subsystems, in order to grow, they start consuming each other. And then I also talked about how we don't always understand our true underlying motivations for our actions. We convince ourselves of all of these narratives that we generate in our heads, and these turn out to usually be post justifications. So I'm sure if you are, a sufficiently self reflective individual, you know that you've done this plenty of times in your life. There's been a couple of times in my life where I've had to realize and come to terms with the fact that basically everything I knew and believed seemed to turn out to be a lie. So, um, how do we get to that point in the first place? Well, we tell ourselves lies and then we don't notice it, and then we build more lies that we don't notice on top of those lies. And maybe we do notice some of them and then we just justify it to ourselves. But in the end, like I said, it's kind of like how central planners need to shift the group think away from reality because central planning doesn't work. It's kind of like how we act individually, where we start with mistruths that we tell ourselves accidentally or purposefully, and then basically when reality starts to creep in, we have the choice whether to accept that new reality, which is kind of like a dying of your former persona in a way. It really is kind of like a very small ego death, and um, the other choice is to just add more lies, knowingly or unknowingly, in order to try to paper over the fact that you've basically taken a wrong turn in your personal development with respect to how reality actually is. Um, and I talked about how groupthink is this emergent centralizing process based on strengthening a group narrative and powered by our need to live with purpose psychologically. And I talked about how central planning doesn't work. That's kind of been like a central theme of this basically series. And think about like how your body is decentralized, right? There's plenty of things that your body does on its own without you needing to consciously do it. So imagine if you had to constantly consciously pump your heart to pump blood around your body, or imagine if you like every reflex, every digestive physiological process, imagine if you had to manually with your brain start releasing certain enzymes depending on what kind of food you eat, and that kind of stuff. It just wouldn't work. And that's the same thing with trying to have a centrally planned economy of any sort. um, and we really need to start um, stepping back and realizing that there are certain things you want, an empire government to do, and there are certain things you want a local government to do, and there's certain things you want government to just stay the hell away from altogether. And in order to hide the reality that central planning doesn't work, over centralization keeps having to generate stronger and stronger groupthinks that are further and further away from reality. Because, like I said, the reality is that the central planning doesn't work. And because the reality of human nature becomes the main hindrance towards further centralization past a certain point, this groupthink naturally goes into an anti humanist direction. And that's part of the reason why I say that these central planners would destroy themselves even by succeeding. Although it's kind of the secondary reason, because the primary reason is, like I keep saying, central planning just doesn't work. Now, today's attempts to continue further centralization is characterized by conflicts within subsystems at different levels trying to consolidate their power. And they naturally seek to position themselves for future scarcity that will turn allies into enemies, even if nobody actually realizes that this is happening. It can happen consciously, but it can also happen as just an emergent process. Different actors acting independently according to their own interest, taking feedback from the interactions they have. And you can see this in this whole build back better paradigm. Like, well, you might know build back better as like, I don't know if it was Joe Biden's. I think it was Joe Biden's campaign slogan. No, it was Joe Biden's like slogan for some of the COVID stimulus that they passed. I think, but it's not just an American thing. Like, Trudeau has, talked about having to build back better. Klaus Schwab has talked about having to build back better. Everybody's kind of parroting this talking point, like as if they're all in cahoots. Maybe they are in cahoots. That's not really necessary for any of this analysis, like I've previously said. But I wanted to draw your attention to this slogan, because what is it actually that they're building? What is it that they actually want to build back better? Because it's not buildings. It's not like there's been a war and everything's been flattened, and then there's all this economic growth that can be generated by rebuilding it all. And I think it kind of has like a double purpose, or kind of like a triple purpose. First of all, the term "Great Reset" turns out it doesn't really resonate with the population. They had to have something better than that. And build back better kind of, like I said, it brings you into this, very subtly into this wartime thinking. And, people will accept more and more authoritarianism as things get closer to war. And that's why they say when all else fails, they'll take you to war, because they'll try to control you using all of these different tactics. But if everything fails, then the last plan of action is always just to go to war and force everybody to rally around the flag, and a lot of people will. And then the third aspect is what they're actually building is they're building technocracy. They're building more systems, basically systems of control. They're not building systems of production or systems of services. They're building systems of control. They want more bureaucracy, more government agencies, more regulations. And it reminded me this week of a famous Lao Tzu quote, which says, where he says, "Governing a nation is like cooking a fish, and overdoing it will ruin it." But we have such arrogance and so little hubris that we can't help but take our sweaty hands and put them all over everything that we see in front of us, and try to solve all of the problems using basically the power of the state through governments, or de facto similar means of control. Like, you can have government control through corporations. So, like I explained when I was explaining the kind of like ESG movement, the government can basically take more and more control of the behavior of the population by just doing it through corporations. And that is basically the original meaning of the word fascism. Fascism is where the government exercises authoritarian control through corporations. And these central planners are doing all this stuff, and as much as they hate reality, they still have to live within it, and trying to continue to live in a fantasy world just makes a rude awakening more inevitable. And there is a perfect storm, which is bringing just that precise rude awakening. And this decade will only be the prelude. I mean, we got plagues going on, we got volcanic eruptions, we got war, we're about to have famine. We're probably going to have blackouts. We're probably going to have insect swarms. We're going to have, serious weed infestations. And all of that obviously comes with significant political turmoil or political crisis. And, they never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think anyway that these events that I'm talking about for over this next decade are just the start of a deeper and more protracted decline of the civilization. So kind of like a catalyst. And I think that the dominant strategy, basically in any situation, is to live with purpose by finding our people, taking responsibility for them, so that we can convince ourselves that we are on the path towards sufficiently realizing our potential, so that we can believe on a deep psychological level that our life has benefited our environment enough to justify the investments that have been made in us by the forces that have created us, such as God, parents, community, your nation, or even your values. And it sounds pretty cliche, like, oh, just be a good person. But I think it's like a clearer way to prescribe exactly the actual mindset to go about um, actually making the world a better place instead of just, pretending or trying to convince yourself through virtue signaling. Because, like I said, virtue signaling is kind of like lying to yourself, and you can build your identity on lies on top of lies on top of lies, but eventually there is uh, likely going to be a reality that you're going to have to come to terms with. It's kind of like the religious idea of you're going to have to meet your maker at some point. So an important part of this be a good person is basically to do your due diligence, have the basically the humility and the honesty with yourself, honesty with others, so that you can accurately determine whether or not you are walking towards the path towards realizing your potential to benefit your surroundings, or whether you're just deluding yourself into thinking that you're doing so, or maybe you're just not caring right now. Which I like I said in a previous broadcast that I think that basically is a road to like a personal psychological hell, just because of the way that we happen to be wired. So how do we apply that calling to purpose in the context of these basically events and trajectories that I've laid out? Well, you need to start securing the potential for self-reliance by building alternative systems which have greater potential for benefit through cooperation than any of the higher level systems in which we find ourselves, because that is really the only way you can actually have friends that won't turn into enemies over scarcity, because hopefully you'll be able to avoid such scarcities. So, what exactly are the scarcities that you want to avoid? Well, there's somebody that I like to listen to on YouTube named Lynette Zhang. And I listen to a lot of people, and I always have certain problems with everybody I listen to. Basically, basically I don't listen to anybody who doesn't have some sort of fundamental flaw. And you're listening to me, and I definitely have some fundamental flaws. And I always try to do my best to try to figure out what they are. But basically, she my problem with her is that she peddles collectible coins. She like tries to convince people to buy collectible coins instead of bullion like precious like investment grade gold and silver. Instead of that, she wants you to buy coins that are like collectible and are priced at way higher than the value of the metal. And her argument is basically that the government is probably going to try to confiscate all the bullion, and they probably won't try to confiscate the collectibles. I think that's nonsense. A lot of other people that I have listened to and read also agree that that is nonsense. Like it's not that hard to hide your investment gold and silver from the government. Like the government isn't going to go door to door and dig up people's backyards to try to find all of this gold and silver. The only way that you would actually get caught is if you're actually trying to use the gold and silver instead of being able to wait out whatever crazy system is outlawing gold and silver to pass, because you'll always have the gold, like the gold and silver will always maintain its value even um, regardless of what kind of system may temporarily make it harder to buy and sell in gold and silver. And it's kind of like that kind of explains, I think, the current gold price. A lot of people do agree that, and I think it's pretty much like a fact if you look into it, that the gold and silver prices are severely manipulated, and the more manipulated they are, the basically the further it is from its fundamental value. So that's just a greater buying opportunity. But these are kind of investment talking points that you can use in any situation with respect to any asset. So I'm just going to move on. So I was saying scarcities to avoid. So the reason I brought up Lynette Zhang in the first place is she basically, so yeah, she like sells gold and silver. She talks about basically monetary policy mostly, like what the Federal Reserve is doing, what the central banks are doing, basically kind of like how the economy is doing. And I've been listening to her for a long time, and it was only pretty recently, I guess it was like maybe just before COVID or just after COVID, where, um, yeah, I think it was just before COVID, where she was basically starting to sound the alarm bell. The whole economy is going down, and she, to her credit, is one of these people that actually grasp the gravity of their own conclusions. You'll see a lot of people like they know that like food shortages are coming, and then they're like, "Oh, but what does this mean for the next election?" It's like um, kind of this attitude that even if they know about all of these problems that are coming, they think that they are immune from it because they're wealthy, they live in America, they live in Canada, they live in 2022. They're not some stupid Africans or some stupid North Koreans or that kind of stuff. So she basically started going more towards like or not moving towards, but she started talking more and more about how you need gold and silver to basically prepare for the economic troubles that are coming. But it's not just gold and silver that you need. You need food, water, energy, barterability, wealth preservation, shelter, security, and community. And I think that this is like a really good checklist in terms of the 8 different kinds of scarcities that you will want to avoid. And I think that is a good direction to orient yourself towards with respect to trying to honestly realize your potential so that you can um, basically not have to worry about reality giving you a rude awakening, because your reality will actually be that you are on the path towards realizing your potential for generating sufficient benefit to your environment to justify the investments that have been made in you by the forces that created you. So let's start with food. So I talked about all of these, different factors that may lead to food shortages soon. Um, so if you want to avoid food scarcity, basically just first you have to prepare for yourself. So you can stock up on food. I would recommend, start with you should be able to survive a month of no grocery stores, right? Like survive, maybe not thrive. Then you want to slowly build that up. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You want to basically work your way up to being able to survive without grocery stores for a year, and then you can start focusing on thriving uh, for as long as possible without grocery stores. Then you want to start you know thinking about all of these other scarcities that I'm going to talk about later. Um, and it's really, really not that hard. It's like sometime like last September um, was when basically my um, my assessment of the whole Russia-Ukraine thing happening basically reached the 95% threshold. And I'd already basically been thinking about all of this other stuff that's happening. So, because all of this, a lot of these processes have been in place since before COVID. Um, and so, like, my family went out and we basically got ourselves to the point of being able to survive 1 year without grocery stores in one single Costco trip, and it was only like $1,500, $1,000, or something like that. Like not even the cost of an entire ounce of gold. Um, so it's really not that hard. You can break it up into multiple multiple trips. Like even if you go to the grocery store every 2 weeks and you buy your regular groceries and then you add another 2 weeks worth of basically food, then basically by the end of the year you will be ready to survive without a year, because every 2 weeks you've been preparing for 2 additional weeks without needing grocery stores. And the idea isn't, oh, the grocery stores are imminently all going to collapse. Well, which is possible. I think it's likelier than ever. But the mentality is just chipping away at your reliance on unreliable systems little by little, because that's the responsible thing to do. I mean, I was talking about how um, responsibility is like a cornerstone for living with purpose. And what's what's more responsible than being humble enough to come to the realization, humble and honest enough to come to the realization that you can't rely on that which is unreliable. You can't just, oh, the economy's going to get better. Oh, the government's going to fix it. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. Oh, we live in Canada. Oh, it's 2022. When the rude awakening comes, none of those excuses are going to save you from reality, frankly. It's not supposed to be depressing. It's not supposed to be scary. Those of you that know me probably know me to be a pretty fearless person. I kind of have high anxiety, but I wouldn't say that I have fear. If anything, I'm I don't know, like trying to like portray a certain level of urgency in different ways to see if I can, push some people closer to the threshold of actually getting off their ass and, doing what is the obvious thing to be doing right now, in my opinion. Um, but anyway, that's food. Also, it's really not that hard to grow some food. You can grow like potatoes and stuff in your yard. You can grow carrots. You can it's there's certain kinds of crops basically that are harder to grow than others, but there are a lot of you know good backyard crops that you can start learning how to grow. I remember when I was a kid, the house next to us, they were growing plums, they were growing cucumbers, and basically they were doing it in such a way that it seemed like it's not like they had to go out every morning and do all of this agricultural labor. It's just um, it doesn't take as much as you think to maintain, and then basically um, if maybe you want to start scaling it up, maybe you don't want to scale it up too much and draw too many eyes, depending on what kind of neighborhood you live in. Maybe like depending on where you live, your focus will be more towards stockpiling and less towards gardening. You do want a bit of both because you don't want, yeah. Anyways, um, and you always want to keep building this capacity, steadily over time because, well, first of all, uh, the food prices are going up anyway. So if there's anything that you can do in terms of um, like I guess lightening the burden on your bank account. Um, it's almost like an investment. Canned food. It's almost like an investment at this point. Or pasta, or certain cooking oils. It's kind of like a unhealthy bull market for such items in a way. Um, and you always need to make sure you have basically enough so that you can barter. You can donate to some people that really need it, that you care about. Because that's part of that, living with purpose and taking responsibility for your people. You ultimately get to decide who your people are, but you know, you still do want to take responsibility for your people to some extent. You don't need to be able to spoon feed them for for like 10 years, but you should be. I think it's responsible to be able to fill in gaps here and there for people that have been basically a positive force in your life. Um, and buying non-perishables is actually good for society, because the faster your supermarket runs out of that stuff, the more they will buy in their next order, basically. And if their wholesaler runs out, then the faster they, uh, buy more from their supplier, and so on and so forth. And then when they're what if like some of these fundamental supply problems that we have will only start to resolve once the signal of that problem makes it up sufficiently along the power structure, and basically you can speed that up. So basically, it's almost like I'm like in all these different ways. The faster we run out of food in the stores, the faster we start fixing the problem. And your particular store will have more non-perishables for other people to stock up on later when they start to realize what's going on. Um, Thanks to you having basically voted with your feet and shifted the uh, basically the whole like supply chain slash economy basically adjusts based on demand, right? So you basically vote with your demand, with your money, and you know that I think you get it. Then there's water scarcity, so maybe um, you want to live near water, or you want to have a getaway location near water. Maybe you want to buy some like prepare some like water filtration, um, like chemicals or filters. Um, because plumbing is also like a system that you rely on. It's run by governments, so that uh, you know if you're preparing for different kinds of scarcity, the water scarcity is something that will very quickly turn friends into enemies. And we don't have a water problem in Canada in the sense that we have all of these lakes, but not everybody lives near a lake that where you can use the water. A lot of people are dependent on plumbing. Um, I went to my parents' house a few days ago, and there was like they had shut off the water for some construction that was happening on the street. So it was, it kind of, um, I could see or experience basically how inconvenient it actually is to lose your running water. And like I said, we're not like Canada's not going to run out of water, but it's obviously very possible that we run out of certain parts that are required to keep our plumbing infrastructure going, or your personal plumbing infrastructure going. Might be due to like a shortage of metals, shortage of manufacturing capacity, processing capacity for those metals to turn them into necessary components and stuff, or like other materials other than metals. Um, or it could be like it could be like political, like it could be fiscal. So like the government just doesn't have money to pay for that work to get done. And then on that note, it could be related to like labor shortages. There might just be, um, we have labor shortages all around us right now. So if that gets worse, and as if economic turmoil gets worse and worse, it could um, alleviate the labor shortage. But if there's like a sufficient level of chaos, then basically all bets are off. You can start setting up like rain capture systems. Um, I my family used to live in Cambridge, and basically in the Tri City area, um, the municipality will give you these like rain catching barrels that go under your eaves trough, and then you can use it to basically water your garden. So there's that. Mm, Stocking up on like water itself in like plastic containers, that's usually not a sustainable option to mitigate against water scarcity. Um, have a plumber friend, or learn some plumbing. Maybe that is a way to mitigate. Anyways, and then there's energy scarcity. Energy scarcity can be, you know, a pretty serious problem, but there's not that much that you can do about energy scarcity. I suppose you can get like solar panels. Um, you can get like advanced battery packs that can store larger amounts of energy. But the technology for that isn't quite very good yet. Same with solar. You can't really have a personal wind or hydroelectric or any other kind of energy generation that I can think of. Energy. You definitely want things that would be able to reduce the amount of energy required to do certain work in the case that the fossil fuels become unavailable. So you mean everybody should have a bicycle. I don't know if it's gone out of fashion these days or whatever, but that way it's significantly easier to get around in the case that something serious happens in the next couple of years and there's no more gas. Um, Other than that, maybe it's like a good time to like retrofit your home or whatever. My parents can do that for you. Um, the next thing is barterability. You don't want to have any shortage of things that you can barter. So non-perishable food items will probably always be barterable. Silver will always be barterable. Gold is a little too dense to really be barterable, and except for like larger purposes. There's wealth preservation. So wealth preservation it would be more towards gold, trying to basically store your wealth in like a certain tangible asset. So most of us use like an investment portfolio or just our bank accounts to preserve our wealth, or real estate. But with all of these other ones, other than real estate, you're basically relying on the banking system to continue to function as normal. And there's so many reasons why you can't really rely on the banking system. So I'm gonna try not to forget any here. So one reason is the banks can go under and basically bail your money in. Any money that you have with a bank, including all of your stocks, is you're basically an unsecured creditor to the bank. Basically means that you've loaned that money to the bank, and if the bank goes under, you don't own it anymore. And another reason is possible government interference. So we saw people get their bank accounts frozen for donating to that trucker protest in Ottawa. And we always think a lot. I mean, you might be tempted to think, oh, but whatever, like that wouldn't be me. They wouldn't just start going after anyone. But it's possible that they could start going after everyone, or like just the unvaccinated, or whatever. Sooner or later, they can come after you. You're not invincible. The government has already shown that they can freeze your bank account. So for like basically nothing, basically something that's completely legal. So as things get more strenuous, like inflation gets bad, food shortages get bad, then people want to start protesting. Then that might mean more government sanctioning of individuals. Basically, they're sanctioning their own citizens. Or it might be like a broader thing to like save the banks. They'll, sanction like the broader account holding society. Another reason is so the banks are becoming more and more digitized. They're very, very digitized, and that's always vulnerable to cyber attack, especially as the prospect of global conflict is getting stronger. Um, there could also be, solar or other natural disaster related anomalies. Um, so, like I was saying, we could have, power outages or energy shortages in general, and then a digitized banking system could, be down for significant amounts of time. There could be um, they could intentionally shut it down on the verge of a panic. So lots of reasons why you don't want to um, rely on the banking system. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use the banking system. Some people will argue that, but I'm basically saying treat it like any investment slash gamble and know your risks. Right? You don't want to put all of your eggs in the banking basket. So if you're thinking about maintaining wealth preservation, you could do it through land, although I don't know how well, you know, real estate would preserve your wealth when it seems like a lot of real estate is overpriced. Um, I don't know. That's like a whole whether the what's going to happen with the housing market and inflation is like a whole can of worms. But real estate would traditionally be a good wealth preservation tool, but that uh, trend might temporarily be coming to a halt, potentially. Gold will always do it. Relying on Bitcoin to preserve your wealth is kind of also like relying on the banks too, because it relies on all of this digital stuff, staying functional. Um, you can say that you can have like cold wallet for your cryptocurrencies and stuff or whatever, but um, if we go into like a prolonged or even temporary um, situation where the grid is down, or the banking system is compromised from like a energy, like electricity level, or like a cybersecurity level, um, then at the end of that, when cryptocurrencies become usable again, who knows whether anybody will want cryptocurrencies? Maybe they will have completely lost their flair. I've previously said that mm, cryptocurrency is kind of like tulip mania, but without the tulips. With the scarcity argument doesn't work, the wealth preservation argument doesn't work. None of the arguments really work, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, so those are some thoughts on preserving your wealth. It's all about managing risks, right? You can have some crypto and some stocks and some whatever, and some gold and whatever. Just don't get into the or yeah, just like don't get into the mindset of just assuming that all of the systems that currently work will continue to work. Just be honest and humble enough to understand what your assumptions actually are, and try to be able to accurately, honestly assess your risks so that you can arrange your affairs accordingly, because that is the responsible thing to do for you, your family, your loved ones, and so on. And for your society as well. Like if you are preparing yourself for um, uh, to withstand scarcity, you are going to be one less person in, participating, one less hungry person, one less person to engage in looting, one less person to become involved in supermarket panic, one less person to have to resort to desperate measures, one less person this, one less person that. Um, shelter's an obvious one. You want to basically have uh, like you basically want your shelter to be you basically want to have a safe place to go at all times. Um, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Um, Maybe you want to learn a thing or two about how to basically maintain your shelter so that you don't have to rely so much on other people to basically make sure that your shelter stays as a shelter. And then there is security, obviously, scarcity, turning, you know, allies into enemies. And you can, I mean, unfortunately, that just includes like your everyday countrymen, your fellow, society members, people, like I said, people who aren't prepared, the people who weren't responsible enough to prepare when scarcity comes, when the perfect storm of reality brings that rude awakening, then more people are going to resort to desperate measures. So you want to deter such people from bringing harm upon you, your family, your loved ones, whatever. Um, so that could come in the form of getting yourself armed. Uh, this could be like a whole topic in and of itself. You can go crazy, schizo, have like a whole like automated like security system and all of that kind of stuff. You want to make sure you want to make sure you're going to have the electricity or the energy to run that stuff. But yeah, that's a big topic. Security. Um, you'll never really be secure enough. There's no limit to pursuing security, and there's no limit to pursuing any of this stuff really. Like if you think about the broader conflict between like the China, Iran, Russias of the world, and NATO, it's really about preparation. Both sides want to have more and more security, more and more food security, physical security, energy security, all of that stuff. Although Canada and the U.S. are absolutely not acting like they're trying to do that one bit. Especially Canada. Canada is really acting um, like we just don't understand what the hell's going on. Like literally, it's like the whole. I don't know. Let's not go that down. Um, I don't have anything relevant to say on that topic. Um, and then the last and no, not the biggest. The biggest is obviously like food and water and stuff. But this is like a big um, a factor that I think a lot of uh, people who are more preparation minded miss or they do incorrectly, but that is community building. So um, basically, a community is kind of like a system, and so it's people cooperating for mutual benefit according to a certain set of usually unspoken and implicit rules. Um, these implicit rules and are basically norms. They arise out of group habits that emerge from group interactions, and these group habits basically as a group becomes more um, significant, entrenched, uh, long living. The group habits organically develop into a culture, and basically that is the path towards nationalism. So basically the way that I think about community building is you're slowly, very slowly and humbly and organically trying to progress towards like a new nationalism, um, and you can basically make sure that you take steps to avoid certain toxic cultural aspects like um, and there's okay, I can just go on and on forever about toxic cultural aspects, but basically try to develop the culture in as healthy of a way as possible. You can't micromanage or engineer such a thing because central planning just doesn't work. Um, I think a lot of prepping communities, uh, I think a lot of them suffer from this whole not really understanding their true underlying motivations and not being, uh, you know, emotionally intelligent or honest with themselves. That's I basically I'm stereotyping, but I've noticed anyway um, that a lot of people who are more preparation minded are less like social minded. So they tend to be less emotionally intelligent, and being less emotionally intelligent leads you to be less likely to be able to understand your true underlying motivations instead of being fooled by your own narratives that your brain generates after the fact, after you've already decided on a course of action based on your emotions. Your verbal brain just assigns um, a reason after the fact so that your sense of self can incorporate that into this story of who you are that you continually tell to yourself in order to sustain this basically this experience of being conscious. Um, so where was I? Oh, yeah, community building. So yeah, it's gotta be organically. You want basically want the culture. A culture is kind of like a code that everybody kind of. It's not a code that everybody executes because not everybody acts the same in a culture, right? But it is kind of like the center of mass of the group in terms of um, a bunch of things like morality and values and rules and customs and taboos and stuff like that. And I think that um, I, I said that nations kind of are like an emergent property of humans, and it kind of has this mind of its own, and this mind is actually much smarter than any of us. And I think that um, the best that we can hope for is for to have to create a culture that um, encodes within itself um, basically has this code that is executed that um, like I think what it should aim for is for there to be as few rules as possible, but all of the necessary rules in order um, to basically make the community, the nation, the system as sustainable and resilient as possible, but also to um, you know reduce suffering without perverting the structure of responsibility. Um, basically, I think it requires a lot of well, no, I think that like you can think of cultures as kind of like a ecosystem where there is like natural selection and kind of like survival of the fittest, and I think that um, based on the fitness criteria that I think is the closest to reflecting the true nature of reality. Um, is a culture that knows what things should be guidance, what things should be law, or what things should be freedoms, um, all of that kind of stuff. Um, I think we have to the best obviously the ideal kind of society is um, one where in my opinion, appropriate levels of centralization and decentralization, appropriate levels of freedom, which they sound extremely libertarian by today's standards. Um, I think that there are certain things that you want your culture to control for. You want it to um, create guidance with respect to avoiding certain cognitive biases through history or mythology or idioms or any of the ways that wisdom is passed down through many generations. You want there to be basically um, balance between keeping what works and deconstructing what doesn't work and building something better. You want, I think, basically, you want to, have this. I think it's important to have some sort of force that encourages, but not forces, people to understand why it's important to have uh, certain, to cultivate certain personality traits like honesty and humility and gratefulness. Um, have like a culture that allows people to live with purpose. Basically, you want to create you want your community to head towards the direction of organically developing a culture that would be a cause that you would want to die for. So if I'm gonna build a community, I want to build a community that um, uh, has XYZ values and systems such that I would be willing to die for the cause of this system. Um, so yeah, so we talked about so that wraps up my um, kind of like 6-part crash course on basically um, there's the foundation of how I see the basically overarching patterns that are all around us that have to do with systems and cycles, and then put that in the context of our nature, our real nature, in reality, about how we think, our natural shortcomings with how we think, how we should basically try to arrange our interactions with each other, and what we should try to avoid. It went through what I think is happening now and why, and where I think it's going. And now I've basically covered what I think there is to do about it. So, if you made it through all of this and you actually paid attention and listened and understood, then thank you so much. Like that is, I obviously appreciate that a lot. Tell me that you've finished it, um, and if you've taken all that time and effort to uh, hear me out and try to basically understand what all of this stuff in my head is all about, then you are definitely somebody that I can appreciate a lot, even if you disagreed with more than 80% of what I said. Um, Thank you for listening, and the show will continue next week. It's just the end of this particular series that I had planned out in advance. So yeah, take care, everybody, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again next week. Bye.